own work in this area. We recently published a major study on the ASEAN economic community, including Wisarn and others, and Peter, and we actually predicted quite strong gains from the ASEAN economic community. Just to give you an idea what they look like, what's in the blue here is what happened within the would be the sort of counterfactual of implementing AFTA, and what's in the red is if you included our simulation for the ASEAN economic community. We see in every case much larger gains that come from the AEC, and in particular, you get a 5.3% increase in national income above the baseline, which is actually quite large for a CG model. All member states gain, especially Singapore and Cambodia, which was always a very uncomfortable result that Singapore would have gained so much. But it reflects in part the fact that when we sort of model the trade costs as iceberg costs, since Singapore traded so much, it gained a great deal from that. So that was one of the reasons it's got such big gains. Importantly, extending the AEC to include other regional and US and EU partners led to a doubling of the gains. And this underscored the importance of keeping the region open. And this is actually something that is emphasized also in the AEC blueprint, the need to keep ASEAN open. And just as a final point, there's a lot of things that we exclude in the model which would actually increase the numbers quite a bit. So we'd argue this is actually a strong downward bias. Okay, so on this need to be open, there's a stress that it needs to be so to be successful. And this would be additional to this idea of an ASEAN one voice consideration. That's what it's called in the ASEAN blueprint, that by cooperating together, that ASEAN can be much more forceful in negotiations of various sorts at the multilateral or plurilateral levels. But it's going to be getting higher gains when liberalizing externally as it consolidates internally, which shouldn't come as a surprise since it does 3/4 of its trade with the outside world, and more than 3/4 of its FDI comes from the outside world. It also suggests a role for the TPP, not only in fashioning these best practices, but in keeping ASEAN itself open. I mentioned that this isn't going to happen in financial cooperation because ASEAN is looking at this sort of cooperation in the ASEAN +3 context. So in this point, ASEAN was perhaps the wrong unit to begin cooperation, but that's really not that important. Okay, so ASEAN has a strong economic, strategic, and set up to nest itself within this wider cooperative framework. But in doing this, it needs to complete the ASEAN economic community, and much needs to be done in this regard. And these frameworks are going to continue to require quite a bit of detail, not much time. My greatest fear with the AEC is that we're going to see happen what we've seen happen very much too frequently in ASEAN, and that is we've got a deadline looming. 2015 is not that far away. And I think that what you're going to see is that you've got all these generalities within the AEC blueprint. There's going to be a tendency to sort of cut corners and declare victory when very little will have been accomplished. That there's too long of an ASEAN story there. The focus is going to be on this 2015. And it's important to have deadlines, but I don't think it really matters if these things are all in place by 2015. If things are going in the right direction. It may take longer to do that. Certainly that was the case in European cooperation. It always took longer to do things than envisioned, but it really didn't matter as long as you're doing the right things. Okay. Now, most likely ASEAN +3 will continue to be this financial cohort within which it'll participate. The TPP and APEC will be for goods, services, and FDI. And in the services, I would include some sort of financial services, because this is always going to be in a accord, at least that the US would be participating in. And that this should help to forge some of the AEC agenda. As a final point, am I doing okay on time, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay, almost done. Okay, I'd argue that a more unified ASEAN will facilitate the process of broader cooperation, broader integration for a number of reasons. First of all, ASEAN cooperation has already reduced the stock of policy divergencies, and when you have when you have completely different customs procedures, when you have a lot of different regulations concerning anything from FDI to various services, because most services barriers are going to find themselves in national regulations and these sort of things. Once you've lined these things up within the context of the AEC, it should make doing this at the Asia Pacific level as well as multilateral easier, at least in principle. Okay. Also, more unified market in ASEAN will make ASEAN Plus agreements easier due to the fact that it would raise the lowest common denominator problem. The United States, when President Bush, the last one, launched the Enterprise for ASEAN initiative, that is sort of to have a greater presence in ASEAN and to begin to negotiate free trade areas based on the US-Singapore agreement. The idea was you'd have a trade facilitation arrangement with these countries, but you would do everything bilaterally. And the reason for that is that ASEAN is so different that you could never come up with a good accord between the US and ASEAN that would be deep enough to satisfy Congress, for example. And that's because the region was so different independently. Well, once they become much closer, it'll be easier, once closer together, once you have this sort of harmonization, it will be easier to have these kind of ASEAN Plus agreements go through. The ASEAN is sitting down with the EU, and this has frankly been a very big issue in the negotiations, this variance in the stock of policy measures. Okay, and then we've got the, some of the strategic issues. You've got ASEAN, China, and the need for policy balance. As I try to mention in a recent East-West Center publication, this idea that from the US point of view, having a unified ASEAN is very important in the region as a way of counterbalancing China in some way. I might even be simplistic to say, like, well, why do some countries support ASEAN Plus 6 rather than ASEAN Plus 3? Well, one answer would be, well, because bringing in India helps to balance that. Well, the deeper integration you have ASEAN, the more ASEAN acts as a unified market, the easier this will be to take place, I think. So this could be another incentive for this, or another knock-on effect of closer ASEAN integration for general Asia-Pacific cooperation. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask the audience to ask just a few clarifying questions, and I'd like to proceed to the next paper.